Well, interestingly, I had a recent experience. I worked for close to 7 years managing an international visual arts program at the U.S. Department of State. And that program supported the participation of U.S. artists in a lot of the major exhibitions around the world. Venice, Sydney, Istanbul, Sao Paulo, Cairo, Dakar. And it was not a well-known program, but it was
yes,
really...
I was familiar with that program, actually. I had looked at the application for that.
So even though it wasn't well known that the government supported artists in that way, it had a really positive effect on the connections made between artists and among artists in all the cities that these exhibitions take place. But at the same time, I was working within an immense and overpowering, in many ways, federal bureaucracy. So I got to see what it was like, the experience of working in a federal bureaucracy from the inside. And I had only recently left that job when CIFO invited me to propose an exhibition to them for December. So my head was really filled with all of these ideas about how power is exercised in either benign or malign ways within bureaucracies or in daily life. And that's what I was thinking about. But with no understanding at that point of what was in the collection. So I approached the collection very openly, thinking wherever this takes me, wherever the work takes me is where my proposal will go. And in fact, I found in the collection so much work of power that by an international group of artists dealing with pressing social issues, artists who were concerned both with geopolitics but also with local issues of poverty, how women, the position of women in certain Latin American cultures, for example, in the work of Regina Galindo, fear in Antonio Montadas. So really, in fact, the things I had been thinking about and the works that I discovered in the collection merged.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the pieces. The one I'm thinking about right off the top of my mind are the photographs that have those architectural kinds of things overlaid over top of them. And while I was over at Art Basel at the main fair, I was looking at a Mona Hatoum piece where, she had this cage and, just thinking about how these kinds of things, this kind of constriction can overlaid over top of the population in the way, architecture is made to force us to go certain ways, and, outlying into society, continuing that whole kind of traffic thing,
I think architecture plays a huge, or can, in a huge place in issues of social control, and how you function within the built environment, how the individual functions or fails to function within the built environment is apparent, I think, in many of the works in this exhibition, certainly in the Stan Douglas photo of the mess hall at the Isle of Pines in Cuba, notorious penal colony, which is panoptic, so that prisoners were observed at every moment, even when they were eating their meals. Also, Frank Thiel's photo of the interior ceiling of the Place de la République, and it's almost an abstraction that nevertheless encourages you to think about the meaning of that building and how its very architecture was synonymous with its use. So I think there are a lot of works in the exhibition that deal with that. The one that you're specifically referring to is Carlos Garaycoa's To Transform the Political Speech in Fact finally. And actually the interesting part about that piece is that he's taken these photographs of an underdeveloped Havana and imagined them as they might have been developed, consistent with many of the leading buildings of the modernist movement.
Right.
So his take is a little bit different. It's really more of a melancholy, I think a melancholy observation on Cuba's failure to develop, its stagnation during the past 50 or odd years. So I think it's slightly different, but yes, I agree with you about architecture.
And then the other thing that I was thinking about was the rise of video works. And, you know, again, dealing with architecture, we have so many new buildings coming up here downtown Miami. And I do know a number of people that live downtown. And, you know, I think still video is something that is still kind of hard for the general public to understand, that it's kind of not a film and more art in this context, you know.
Hard for the public to understand within the context of the visual arts.
Right.
For the general public, that may still be the case. And I think even when I think about friends and family, people who have no relationship to art, when I talk about the kinds of things that I do, they're sometimes a little confounded about, well, how can that be art? I mean, obviously, the people who are here today understand totally. I mean,
right,
the art audience now is so used to this merger of the moving image and the visual arts, which is a good thing. I started my career in film and video. I started in the film and video program at the Whitney many, many years ago, at a time when video was in a kind of limbo state. Mm-hmm. You know, it wouldn't be reviewed by the film critics because they said it wasn't theatrical film.
Right.
And art critics wouldn't touch it. There was a famous art critic for the New York Times, John Cannaday, and when approached by the Whitney and MoMA, which also had a video program, a nascent video program at that time, he was famous for saying, "If it moves, I don't touch it." So think of how far we've come. And then there was a period, of course, when video and film were sort of ghettoized in the art world. There would be a visual arts exhibition and then a tandem video exhibition, usually single channel, or they were segregated into exhibitions of their own. But now there is this seamless and very important interlacing of the moving image in the visual arts that I think is just wonderful.
Well, I think what is nice here about this installation is the way that you have them mixed together. You know, I think that when you have just a plain single videos or a room full of videos, I don't think it really has the same kind of effect, you know. But this kind of installation lends itself to, I think, a better understanding of the relationship between those two things, you know.
Oh, I'm glad you agree. That was my hope and that was my intention. And also dealing with a thematic issue and letting the works in the exhibition flow from that. Rather than the other way around, starting with the medium or materials and going that way.
I think they flow together very well, you know, going back and forth, because some of the photographic images you see replicated in some of the videos, not specifically the same thing, obviously, but, you know, the same kinds, the same type of environments. And so I think they flow very well together.
Great. I'm glad you like it.